bit. We found out not too long ago that the Hard Knocks, not the in-season. So we know that the off-season edition is with the Giants. We know that the training camp edition is with the Bears. Now the in-season Hard Knocks is going a little bit bigger. Last year it was the Dolphins. This year it'll be the Steelers. And the Ravens, and the Browns, and the Bengals. It's the AFC North.
How about it?
They're doing it as a whole. I actually like this.
I do too.
Because you're in season. I get during training camp, I think we should just focus on one team. I don't think we need the off-season one, but sure, go ahead if you want to throw another one in there. But in season, I love the idea that there's going to be, because then I think you rotate each year with a different division. I think it's going to pull more people in, and I think that's probably why they're doing it this way. But it did get us thinking, and we've seen the Hard Knocks version of training camp here in Tampa Bay less than a decade ago with Jameis Winston in one of his years here. So it got us thinking here on our program, Jay and Zach, what would be the three biggest Bucs storylines if Tampa Bay had Hard Knocks this year? And I think it's a really good conversation to have. By the way, if you missed this at the top of the show, we did find out that the Bucs are going to be holding training camp dates. We actually found out the entire league's training camp dates. And for the Bucs, as I pull it back up here, we found out that Monday, July 22nd is when the rookies are going to report for Tampa Bay. The next day, July 23rd on Tuesday, the veterans will report, and we'll find out the fuller schedule, I'm sure not too long from now, in terms of, Military Appreciation Day, Season Ticket Member Day, the days open to everybody. We'll kind of get those dates sooner rather than later, but it is good to see that we can at least say the 22nd, Monday, July, that's when we're going to get rolling in training camp for the Bucs. But Jay, as we look at a hypothetical Hard Knocks here in Tampa Bay, what would it look like if the Bucs were hosting the HBO show in training camp?
Let's see. I think the first story, it's going to go with the quarterback, and it's going to go with Baker Mayfield. Year 2 with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He gets the deal. He's a new papa. He's ingrained himself into the Tampa Bay area. He's done a real good job assimilating himself into the community. But yeah, I think it starts with Baker. I mean, this is a dynamic guy, a former number 1 overall pick. He looked like he was headed out of the National Football League. Cleveland. Goes to the Rams, goes to the Panthers, now here with the Buccaneers, and he's found home. And the way that he's been able to ingratiate himself into this Buccaneers organization as a whole, and to get he's going to baseball games with these guys. He's going to hockey games. Like, this guy is, he's Team Tampa Bay through and through. So I appreciate that. But I think it's very interesting because he still plays with a chip on his shoulder. And he's a very interesting character and an interesting human being. I think it all starts with Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that, too, is that he is such a personality, right? Regardless of, if you love him, you hate him, you think he's matured, you think he is the guy, whatever you think. He's a personality. People love being around him. We saw that on Radio Row during the Super Bowl. We saw it during the Pro Bowl where he won the MVP and he was able to be a good sport. I remember them asking him after the throwing competition about how he felt or whatever, and he made a joke about, well, my last pass wasn't too great because there's an interception in Detroit to end the season. I think Baker's a great personality. And I think if there was a hypothetical Hard Knocks with the Bucs this training camp, it would be a no-brainer to follow him around in the camp and off the field. He loves to hang out, and he takes the guys out on the boats to the Bahamas. It'd be a hell of a good time.
I'm with you, man. I think it would be a lot of fun. What do you guys think? If the Buccaneers were featured on Hard Knocks, what would the 3 biggest stories be? 888-546-4620, 82945 on the Bartow 4 DAE text line. Start that text with DAE, followed by your thoughts. Again, we are streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Go check us out over there. You can comment on the program that way. So we both agree Baker Mayfield would be number 1. I think number 2 is a guy like Lavonte David. This is a guy that, every single year he plays, you have to wonder if this is it. Is it going to be the swan song for 5-4? A guy that is a future Ring of Honor player for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Maybe a Veterans Committee selection for the Hall of Fame when all things are said and done. When you just look at the numbers, we know that there is a lack of Pro Bowls and All-Pros on that resume that ultimately could hurt him when it comes to him being enshrined into Canton. But man, Lavonte David, just a good dude, the guy who's seen everything when it came to the Buccaneers, the good, the bad, the downs, the ups, the Super Bowls, the terrible seasons, the number 1 overall draft picks. I think Lavonte David would be a really, really good story.
Yeah, and I will say this, as much as he's been underrated most of his career, and it did take Tom Brady bringing the eyes of the football and just the world in general to Tampa Bay for 3 seasons, I see his name come up a lot more And I think that he's getting respect now. Unfortunately, might be too little too late in terms of a future trip to Canton. But, whether I'm watching Good Morning Football, whether I'm seeing the talking heads on the 4-letter network, whether I'm just watching reels and TikToks and things that are popping up from the football community outside of Tampa Bay, Lavonte David's name does come up a lot. You saw him on Rich Eisen, I think, twice this offseason already. So I do think he's starting to get more love now. And I don't remember him being a big piece of the last Hard Knocks when it was in town. I agree with you, though. I think this would be a moment for him to kind of swan song it out in a way where he would get some of the love he honestly has deserved his whole career. And honestly, if that were the only thing that we could pin to it, I know we're not, obviously it's going to be with Chicago, but it would be worth it to have Hard Knocks this training camp just so that Lavonte got even more love.
Yeah. Couple of texts here on the Bartow 4DA text line from the 352. Mike Evans is such a magnetic dude. I don't disagree that Mike Evans would be a great feature on the program. Seriously, though, Winfield and Wirfs, one got paid, the other is waiting, would be great storylines. That could be number 3. And then also from the 727, the wide receiver room with all of those personalities. And you and I both agreed that number 3, the third biggest story, would be the big guys, and we want to put them together. Tristan Wirfs on the offensive side, Vita Vea on the defensive side, 2 anchors of this team. Veda dropping the weight, but we know the personality. I mean, the guy's freaking hilarious. He's so funny. We'll look at him and the interaction with the Buccaneers social media crew. And then Tristan Wirfs, one of the most gregarious, engaging people that we have in the Tampa Bay area, one of the best athletes in the National Football League. He's going to get paid. So I think big dudes, big personalities would be number 3 for me.
Yeah, and specifically to those 2 guys. Remember, it's not always about what they're doing on the field, where, they do have some fun. We've seen Vita Vea mic'd up a few times where he's shotgunning Gatorade kids, and he's, having a good old time singing. But I think about, away from the actual camp dates, Vita Vea training with a guy like Ndamukong Suh. You don't think they'd want some footage of that?
Right.
Tristan Wirfs shotgunning actual beers on stage with a guy like Luke Combs. Like, we've seen both these guys, and we know that they're doing things outside of when they're specifically with the Bucs, that they're still big personalities. They're larger-than-life guys, and on the field, they're larger-than-life players. So, yeah, I think that's kind of a no-brainer, too. And this show, HBO and their Hard Knocks crew, does focus primarily on personalities, and they're looking for the stories that aren't necessarily integrated specifically into what's happening on the field, but a lot of good suggestions here about things that are actually X and O related. And, for me, a close fourth was the wide receiver room. I think that when you're talking about who's going to end up where, you got a great personality, a Hall of Famer in the future in Mike Evans. You got what's going on with Chris Godwin in his final contract year with the Bucs. And then that big smorgasbord of a logjam at wide receiver 3 and 4, from Sterling Shepard to Trey Palmer to Jalen McMillan, and throw in Raheem Jarrett and the undrafted kid in there as well. The wide receiver room would be a lot of fun, but I think that would be more of a broad look instead of one individual player.
I'm with you, and I love the big story has to be the rookie center going on the O-line, and Baker, Graham Barton. He seemed like a guy where his personality kind of came out a little bit there towards the end of camp, and seeing some of the offensive linemen for this Tampa Bay Buccaneers team over the years, it seems like they're just different kinds of dudes. And maybe the offensive line as a whole, I think, would be... I would love to hear Tristan Wirfs chopping it up with Cody Mauch, and Luke Gedeke is pretty damn funny as well. And you get Graham Barton in there. I wouldn't hate the offensive linemen, because we know over the years, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, even going back to Donovan Smith and Ali Marpet, and they're just some funny-ass dudes, man. So I don't think there's any wrong answer. That is for sure. All right, when we come back, we got our PCA Spotlight. Krista Cunningham is going to join us from the Baycare Health System and discuss what she has going on. But first...
when I moved into my house, everyone was like, Zach, good luck, man. Home improvements. You think you're towards the end of one, there's 10 more popping up. They never stop. Get ready for it. And now it's harder than ever, because that costs money. And to save money, it's even harder than it's ever been, because every paycheck is going towards bills, going towards debt, going towards life. And I know I'm not alone in that. You're listening. You're like, yep, we get it, brother. Good news, though. If you own a home in Tampa Bay, there's probably a ton of equity in that house. That's why you need to call my guy, the local guy, John Howard, right now. HowardTeamHomeLoans.com. All I'm asking for, folks, 10 minutes. Maybe even 9. You don't have 10, you got 9 minutes. Okay, call him. Carve out that time for John Howard. He can investigate the best way to access your equity, free up your cash flow, get you out of bad debt. Don't wait until it's too late. If you're already missing payments, it's only going to get worse, not better, as your debt builds up. We can all afford a 10-minute phone call today. Hey, maybe you're renting a home. That means you're making rent payments on time. Tip of the cap to you. You could probably do the same with a mortgage payment, but my guess is that funds for a down payment is what's holding you back. Don't let it be the difference, though. John and his team